I would like to invite up to the front, up to the microphone, our good friend Brian Wright, who's going to tell us about the USS Liberty, the survival of the Liberty, and the 50th anniversary, and what this all means. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for Brian Wright.
Thank you. Yes, I guess this year it kind of came up, and I'm focusing more on, this is the 50th anniversary tomorrow of the attack on the USS Liberty by Israel. It was during the Six-Day War, and most of the material that you'll find deals with just with the attack, which is what I will deal with. But I think the focus needs to be on the survival of that craft, because that has pretty strong implications that could be very positive. So this is the anniversary. Oh, let me also point out that this presentation is at brianrwright.com/ussliberty.pdf. So you can write that down if you care to. And because I have some resources at the end I think that are useful. The next slide, please. I wanted to put some disclaimers up here, because once you start talking about especially anything having to do with Israel, you're going to be accused of being a conspiracy theorist or an anti-Semite. So I don't want, I just leave you with that slide. The term conspiracy theory was actually concocted by the CIA following the JFK assassination. And this book here, Conspiracy Theory in America and it was to neutralize dissent from the standard official view. So conspiracy theorists or people that want investigation, they're actually fighting state crimes. We're trying to end state crimes against the Republic. As for anti-Semitism, I think neither I nor 99% of the millions of individuals who question or deplore the actions of the State of Israel or political Zionism, which led to Israel's creation, are anti-Jewish, any more than those of us who deplore the actions of the American government, a lot of people in this room, are anti-American. So next slide here. So okay, let's just get right to the incident. This is basically, I'm going to kind of go through these fairly quickly, but there are films and there'll be resources, and I'll point them out. But this comes from the Moore report, which was an independent commission and reported in 2003. Also a war crimes report that was by the Liberty Veterans Association to try to get a formal war crime inquiry by the Department of Defense. Back on that day, and on June 8th, international waters 15 miles off the coast of the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, Israel conducted a 2-hour air and naval attack against the USS Liberty, with the world's most sophisticated intelligence ship at the time, inflicting 34 dead and 170 plus wounded, many of them very seriously, and a crew of about 300. There was an air attack that approximately lasted 25 minutes, 30 or more sorties, unmarked Israeli aircraft. And they figured that out later, but they dropped napalm canisters on the bridge. They fired hundreds of 30-millimeter cannon and rocket rounds into the ship. Next slide, please. Minimum of 12 planes, jamming all 5 American emergency radio channels. I want to also point out here that the Liberty was intensely surveilled before this attack, by over a period of several hours, by several aircraft. So, and they were marked Israeli aircraft. So they were being surveilled by the Israelis before the air attack happened with unmarked planes. Okay, the torpedo attack then followed after an interval of a few minutes, several minutes actually, and it fired 6 torpedoes, one of which struck the Liberty. It was only by the skill of the captain, Captain McGonigal, that they were able to avoid those 5. Otherwise, it would certainly have sunk. They machine gunned the Liberties. These motor torpedo boats machine gunned the Liberties firefighters and stretcher bearers, and then they returned to machine gun all the Liberty life rafts, which is a war crime. Next please. Oh, let me go back up here. I just want to point out that no, back to, I guess, two. Here, this is the BBC documentary in 2002, and I've got those links on my, it's on the PowerPoint, so you can kind of refer. This is a very good little film. Next, please. But probably the most common film is this Loss of Liberty, which is the icon there, or the image on the right. But what happened was that there was one sailor who, during the strafing, they totally wiped out the communications. All the antennas, and it was just a bloodbath up on deck. So, but this one sailor, and I forget his name, Terry something, he actually strung a coax cable directly from a transmitter to a little bit of a functioning antenna, and was able to get out a distress signal. If he hadn't gotten the distress signal out, the Liberty would probably have been sunk, and the attack would have achieved its objective, which we'll get into later. So there were aircraft that were sent, and I'm not really clear of the exact timing of that. I've done some reading here, but they were recalled. The initial two that were sent, I believe, were what they call ready aircraft, which means they were carrying nuclear weapons or nuclear bombs, and I believe that was called back so that they didn't really want to cause World War III. Okay, but then again, there was on his own recognizance, one of the admirals in the 6th Fleet, which was about 500 miles away. Liberty was off on its own. All right, but about 500 miles away, either USS Saratoga or USS America launched a non-nuclear sortie of A4s, and they were on their way, and then they were called back. That happened from the top. They were recalled. Okay, next. So that message had gone out, so that everybody knew now that the Liberty had survived this aircraft attack, and that the 6th Fleet knew about it, and they were sending help. At least that's what it sounded like. That message was sent in the clear. All right. After the 6th Fleet transmission, the Israeli boats, the torpedo boats, broke off of their attack and transmitted messages asking if USS Liberty required assistance. Yeah, that's part of it was a failed operation, obviously. And then the naval attaché notified the United States 6th Fleet and the rescue aircraft were recalled, and I believe there was an apology in there. Mistakenly had attacked the USS Navy ship. Okay, next slide. About the same time as the cessation of the torpedo boat attack, Israeli attack helicopters arrived over the ship. And this is interesting. These were Army. This was a multidisciplinary or multi-armed forces assault because you had Army, Navy, and Air Force. So these were Army, and these were marked. These were helicopters. There were people in there with battle dress. They were coming in to finish everybody off. All right. So they departed probably because they realized that help was on the way, that the information now is in the clear, and the Liberty had survived. Okay, connected with rescue vessels eventually in early hours of 6/9, and wounded were transported and cleanup was performed. A lot of dead bodies and dead body parts, and it limped into Malta for a final repair cleanup, mainly cosmetic, because there was a huge hole that torpedo caused. It was like 40-foot diameter, 35 by 29 or something. Anyway, it was a huge hole, and the ship was listing strongly, like at 9 degrees to port or to starboard, and so there was a question whether or not it would sink. So they were shoring that up. But anyway, what happened was there's a $40 million ship, and it was scrapped for like a little more than $100,000. The top Navy brass, under the Court of Inquiry umbrella, imposed a blackout on the entire event, and they threatened crew with jail or worse if they were to even mention this to anybody. Okay, next. So incredible acts of courage and heroism. All of these men, the captain received a silver Medal of Honor. This is the crew, is the most decorated crew since World War II. It is among the most decorated crews for a single engagement in the entire history of the United States Navy. Yet the attack has never received a full investigation as required by law. All of the, by the way, all of these awards were made without any specificity as to what they were doing. And they were again told not to talk about their experience. So it didn't say they were under attack, certainly not by the Israelis. Okay, so and that's kind of remarkable, and I'm just kind of quoting that. Captain McGonigal received his Medal of Honor, not typically by the president at the Oval Office, but it was at the Navy Yard somewhere southeast Washington, D.C. And that occurred only after the Israeli government was solicited for whether or not they had any objections. So next slide, please. All right, this is, again, that's a very good book, Attack on the Liberty. I'm reading that now. This is the official position by Rusk. Dean Rusk basically was sort of in an awkward position, but he did believe the Israelis intended to do this. And that's kind of reflected in the language of his formal protest to Israel. Then the Navy Court of Inquiry was rushed. I think it was 10 days. Their mission was to do it in 1 week. Chaired by John McCain, the elder. He was a very elevated guy, and yeah, okay. Anyway. But any testimony significant to, like, the life raft being machine gun, whether they were unmarked planes, a number of other facts of the attack, was excluded from the final report. So, next please. There was an independent commission of inquiry this was like some very heavy hitters who really wanted to get the testimony from the crew of the Liberty. All right, this was Admiral Moore. These are all good guys. And there was he's a former chairman of the JCS, Raymond Davis, a U.S. Marine Corps, also Medal of Honor winner, former assistant commandant of the Marine Corps, and Rear Admiral Merlin Starring, who is the United States former judge, advocate general of the Navy. This was the only investigation that included testimony in the public from officers and crew. These are the findings. There is compelling evidence that Israel's attack was a deliberate attempt to destroy an American ship and kill her entire crew. This report, by the way, was filed October of 2003, and the media basically ignored it. Attacking the USS Liberty, Israel committed acts of murder against American servicemen and an act of war against the United States. That fearing conflict with Israel, the White House deliberately prevented the U.S. Navy from coming to the defense of the Liberty by recalling 6th Fleet military rescue support while the ship was under attack. Never before in American history, naval history, has a rescue mission been canceled when an American ship was under attack. Next, please. The Liberty was saved from destruction by the heroic efforts of the crew and the captain. The surviving crew members were threatened with court-martial imprisonment or worse by a rear admiral named Kidd, whose role in this, I think, maybe he regretted having to follow the party line, but he was right underneath McCain the elder. Due to the Israel's powerful supporters, the White House deliberately covered up the attack. Next. Again, due to continuing pressure by the Israel lobby, the United States, this attack remains the only serious naval incident ever thoroughly investigated by Congress. No surviving crew member has been permitted to officially publicly testify about the attack. and their comment on the danger to our national security when this prevails. Next, please. These are all like facts that I got this from Global Research, and again, if you go to my page, you can verify these. This is proof of conscious intent. Unmarked fighters shooting out the communications equipment. They jammed all the frequencies. They had to know the frequencies. The Liberty was flying not one but two flags. The initial one was shot up, and so McGonigal ordered the second one, which is a huge ensign, to be flown. And of course, there was a very brave person very brave sailor who erected that. There were declassified radio transcripts of the Israeli forces of conversation between the aircraft pilots and the home base, and the pilots are acknowledging that this is an American ship, and they're told to proceed with the attack. I think there's like 3 or 4 inquiries. They say, well, this is an American ship. They say, go ahead with the attack, you know, so like, and they assumed that the Israelis said that they mistook the Liberty for an Egyptian vessel, which was a World War I vessel and about 5 times smaller. Even Lyndon Johnson said he believed the attack was intentional, and he inadvertently leaked it to Newsweek, I guess. So anyway, there's just way too many pieces of evidence that show this was an intentful act. Next, please. All right, well, we won't know why. I mean, this is always speculation, you know. Pardon me? Yeah, why? Who did it? Why? What was the motive? What was the sinking the Liberty? I think this is kind of like the 2 options that I see. Sinking the Liberty was a calculated reaction by Israel toward the end of the 6-day war for reasons of wanting to conceal other actions or war crimes. There are reports of like execution of prisoners peremptorily in the Sinai. They just didn't want to take them back to, you know, and put them in prison, so they just killed them. Then were also attacks on Golan Heights. There were some land grabs going on that they may not have wanted to. They certainly wouldn't have wanted to, but anyone to know. But the thing is there were other, besides the Liberty, there were other surveillance. And this is kind of why I'm leaning toward, you know, our argument number 2. But of course, we don't know. But there were other aircraft. I mean, there were aircraft, surveillance aircraft in that neighborhood, so they would have also picked up on a lot of this other information. I think these attacks were planned, and this is a book called Operation Cyanide that you can find out on the web. It's pretty expensive. I haven't read it yet. I'm planning to go, by the way. I'm going down to the Norfolk reunion tomorrow. I'm not a military guy, but I'm saying. But this is just a cause I got to get part of, and I realize in the 50th year, you know, 50 years and nobody's had any kind of justice on this. So I'm going to do what I can. There's a screenplay that I may have a hand in promoting, in editing or what have you, and maybe moving forward with that. But anyway, Operation Sinai was this. I think this what it was, and the movie Dead in the Water really refers to this directly. Operation Cyanide. And there were actually U.S. pilots and aircraft being used by Israel in the days leading up to the war. There were surveillance aircraft, but they were marked. They were American aircraft, but they were marked as Israeli. And I mean, I'm saying that there was cooperation at a very high level between the United States government, the deep state, and the deep state of Israel. So I think probably in coordination with U.S. deep state as a false flag. I believe this was a false flag action to be blamed on the Egyptians and bring in the United States into the Middle East militarily, explicitly on the side of Israel. The problem with that is, and this is also part of Dead in the Water, they interview a few Russians. Again, these guys are all in their 70s and 80s. They talk about the fact that you know, they were in the Mediterranean, you know, watching the war, and they were technically on the side of the Arabs, or pretty much on the side of the Arabs, and had had the false flag attack elicited the anticipated result, namely a nuclear attack, I have no doubt that the Russians would have launched nuclear weapons, short-range nuclear weapons against Haifa, which is the seaport of Israel, and probably other Jewish or Israeli installations. So, anyway, next slide, please. Okay, this is the conclusions and recommendations of the War Crimes Report of the Liberty Veterans Association that they are putting on this event that I'm going to leave for tomorrow. No statement by the United States has ever reversed the amended formal position of the United States Secretary of State Rusk. Apparently there was some talk about bringing charges, but I don't think that they were by Israel. But I don't think they were certainly going to go after the Minister of Defense, Moshe Dayan, or the Prime Minister, Levi Eshkol, or the principals of any Operation Cyanide. So the idea, first turn it over to an examining judge, and the judge next, please. He disagreed, and he basically said did not discover. So he basically absolved everybody in Israel from, from any inquiry, any further inquiry or investigation or indictment, what have you. No one in the Israeli government or military has received so much as a reprimand for their involvement in the attack. Next, please. And this is part of the War Crimes Report being submitted to the Secretary of the Army in lieu of apparently the Secretary of Department of Defense. I don't know what the exact reason, but this was done in 2005, I believe. So the United States government had never Congress has never investigated the attack, and they've noted the LVA is noting several irregularities and fraudulent acts of the Court of Inquiry. Next, please. Conclusions and recommendations. This is all pretty bad. They vilify these people for bringing this up. They call them anti-Semites, neo-Nazis, and so forth. And they claim there were 13 investigations, and that showed it was Israeli innocence or case of mistaken identity. But next, please. And they had these sailors go down, and when the ship was dry docked in Malta, they were ordered to go down and bring all the classified stuff up. Well, the classified material, the torpedo hit the classified area. It hit the room where they're doing all this spook stuff. Okay, so there were body parts of men that these people knew, and they were instructed they had to go in and clean that up and bring all that stuff out. So that was very disrespectful. Anyway, so I don't know if you can read that. Failure of the United States government to undertake a complete investigation has resulted in a grievous harm to the surviving victims. Equally serious, this failure has resulted in an indelible stain upon the honor of the United States of America. It has sent a signal to America's serving men and women that their welfare is always subordinate to the interests of a foreign state. Next, please. And there's all about this kind of controversial, but I think we're all American firsters. And this comes from George Washington. I don't think anybody could say it better. A great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is in extending our commercial relations to have with them as little political connection as possible. It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. Against the wiles of foreign influence, I conjure you to believe me, fellow citizens, the jealousy of a free people ought to be constantly awake, since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of Republican government. And then this quote came shortly after the incident by George Ball, was Undersecretary of State. And this is a turning point of American and Israeli relations. Prior to this event, there was some attempt at being impartial and kind of, in other words, Israel didn't get everything it wanted. In fact, I think its foreign aid numbers are very low. But this was amazingly And according to Ball, he said, it seemed clear to the Israelis that as American leaders did not have the courage to punish them for the blatant murder of American citizens, they, the Americans, would let them, the Israelis, get away with anything. Next, please. These are some ideas of mine. I don't know. I'm working on a couple of people, a couple of survivors. Well, 3 or 4 of them have actually worked with a screenplay writer, and there is a screenplay for a feature film. You know, so I think, and it's a good one. I mean, I think it needs a little editing, and you know, this is not an anti-Jewish thing. This is an anti-Israeli thing. This is an anti-state thing. This is, you know, this is not, it has nothing to do with Judaism or anything else. It's a war crime, okay? And we need to bring justice to those responsible for that. And we need to bring honor and appropriate recognition for all these brave men. They're heroes. And they need to be, and I like the idea of having a, I think the Independent Commission called for a national holiday. Liberty Remembrance Day is June 8th. So there you go. Next, please. Here's kind of some other thoughts of mine. You know, I have some ideas. My thinking lately is I have a site called Global Spring. I think this book here, though, is extremely important to read to get a historical context. It's a very short book of the relationship between Israel and the United States by Alison Weir, and it's just an eye-opening book. But this is you know, it all folds in, I think, to we're being manipulated. This is an important quote, and we need to get beyond this manipulation. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who run this unseen mechanism constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. Now that was Edward J. Bernays, the father of public relations. He was the one responsible for being in the World War I propaganda department, who made out the Germans to be Huns and baby rapers and you know, bayoneting women, and there was a awful campaign to get America into the war by demonizing the Germans and that. Anyway, my philosophy is pretty consistent with the Thrive movie, and I highly recommend it. It's pretty easy to find. Thrive. It's a free film. Next, please. Oh, I wanted to also mention another thing consistent with, I've written a book called The Truman Prophecy, and one of my key ideas in terms of what you can do, I think we need to resurrect the People's Independent, Restored, Multi-Level Everywhere grand juries. I call them prime grand juries. These are not the current grand juries, which are all captured by the state. But we the people need to invoke our grand jury power and authority, you know, both as a sword against corrupt government behavior. And this will qualify as an international, I mean, this is a new idea. You have to sort of think outside the box. But if you keep going back to commissions and people like that, well, the commissions are all captured. They're captured. They're not gonna, it's like the fox in the hen house, you know. They're not going to rule in anybody's favor. They're not going to ruin the hen's favor. So this is a way for people to reassert their power. And so I could talk to people about that later. But I have some books in philosophy. I've actually created a moral philosophy called Trumanism, and I'll talk to you about that later. This is just reference material I've gathered, which again, the name of this presentation is, this is for further research. You know, I've read most of these or watched most of these. And it's, the name of the file is brianrwright.com/USSLiberty.pdf. Next, I think that's it. Oh, I didn't mention that. Yeah, there is the there is the celebration, there's a celebration in Norfolk tomorrow through Saturday. And these are all the survivors, and I'm going there to pay my respects and see what I can do to help.
Norfolk, Virginia?
Yeah.
Have you heard about Boston Ward? He was a JAG officer. They actually interviewed these guys. I saw a report from him from 2004.
Yeah, there are a lot of good guys, he's one of
He
them.
interviewed 50 of these guys. And,
Yeah.
Anyway, it was ordered to keep quiet, but then
Well, they all were, and I think until the book Assault on the Liberty by James Ennis was produced back in like the 80s, that's when the dam started to crack, because they were terrified about, and they were all shipped off to different units. I mean, they weren't supposed to talk to one another either. I mean, and they were some of the people that are principals of this Liberty Veterans Association, at that time they were terrified. They were terrified to talk, and so but it's broken free. But the problem again, you've got like controlled media, and the media is kind of embedded in the global architecture, deep state, and it's not going. So whatever we do has got to be done at a grassroots level, and invoking a lot of our, like the grand jury is something that's pretty. We just have to dust it off and re-implement it, and maybe put some code together to pay people better or whatever. But I'm just saying, a grand jury is a very powerful tool, because first of all, it only produces an indictment, but it gets the citizens involved. That I think is the only thing that we'll be able to do. So,
Brian, thank you very much. How about a round of applause?